Welcome back to Global News Morning. A pleasure to have you join us and a pleasure to be talking to our good friend, Matt Lee. And Matt, good morning. How are you, bud?
I'm great. How are you?
Very well. Good to see you. We're talking about
Good.
offers that are being held off. So if you are a
Yeah.
buyer putting in a listing and you don't hear anything for a while, that's because the seller is accepting offers and holding off on offers for a short amount of time. But why? What's the advantage of this?
Yeah. So I think that, when we're looking at listing a property, we're talking to the seller about what the demand is in that area. And we kind of go through it and we explain these, different situations for different properties. And and I think that this is happening a lot in our market right now, and I think it's something that really needs to be explained. So there's a form that's called a 244, and it is a seller's direction. You walk in to do a listing, you talk about what's happening in their neighborhood, and you talk about the individual property, and you go through all of the steps. One of the questions that a seller asks is they say, how many showings do you think that we would have on this property? And even though it's a tough question to answer, you can kind of gauge um, within reason. And if it's a high demand, then they usually ask that they hold offers off once you explain the situation for 3 to 5 days, 3 to 6 days, so that people can to either get here and get through, but also, I mean, there's COVID restrictions.
Mm.
We don't overlap showings anymore. Like one person isn't outside and one person's inside. It's one of these things that we say, okay, you've got half an hour, 45 minutes, and then they do blocks. And we do see houses, in certain price ranges that are getting 40, 50, 60 showings.
Wow.
So when you have a demand that is in that realm, you say, well, how do we get these people through with one, the restrictions to make sure that everybody's safe, and two, to make sure that everybody has a fair crack at it. So, I think that basically holding off offers, so 3 to 5 days in this situation is really the safest and the healthiest for really everybody. I think that it's one of these things that you explain the situation to the seller, and you say, okay, we're going to make sure that everybody gets through. Um, and there's things that happen in between, in between that 3 to 5 days, or the 1 to 5 days. You might have somebody that says, well, I want to do a pre-inspection, and they want to get in and they want to possibly bring an inspector through for an hour. If the seller allows it, then like they're preparing themselves in the best way they can. They're taking the listing, they're sending it off to their financer, and they're getting things in the best situation for themselves. So, there is a bit of a time delay on certain properties, but I think that it seems to be working very well right now. And, if things change in the market and there's not as much of a demand, then maybe that changes again. Well, really, what happens is that you actually go through, and say you go through on day one on the showing. Your real estate person actually has a sheet that says no preemptive offers, not looking at offers until such and such a date. So you don't actually send your offer in. They'll just be gathering them at a certain time, and then reviewing them all at the same time. So you would actually wait until that time,
Okay.
and then the seller would go through them with their agent, and I sit down with them, and we go through everything. And we do see letters, and you do see things to make them kind of stand out. But it's all at once usually, at right now. We do see, unique properties that we say, what, just we're going to go on the market and go forward, because maybe you don't think that there is as much, there's not going to be as many showings on certain properties. It's just the way it
Yeah.
is. I mean, it depends on where it is. But if you're in town and in certain spots, it'll be busy.
Okay, well, speaking of busy, I know we know you are busy. Now, the real estate world, one of the first to adapt quickly to the pandemic and restrictions. We are starting to see some restrictions being lifted. How has the real estate world
Yeah.
been affected a year later, almost a year and a half later?
A couple of things. One is there was people moving out of the city, which is not as big as what maybe I think that has been kind of forecasted, or what people think. The interest rate being low is driving demand, and real estate is a very hot topic for people when there's not a lot going on. And so when they're at home and they're in a certain, they're in their bubble, they're thinking, well, maybe I need to get a bigger house, or maybe I want some space, or maybe I want to downsize. Maybe now is the time. I think that that's what's been driving a lot of this. So I see that that's been the busy time. I see that we do have some financial stress test restrictions that have just come into place. It'll take a little time to figure out how that's going to play out. And we're starting to see a little more inventory. So that's good too for the market, and we want it to stay healthy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Matt Lee. I see behind you your bookshelf. It's got some nice pictures of the family, which you should have. I
Yeah,
notice you have some space on top, so if you don't mind,
yeah.
I like to put a picture of me on top of there, and we'll end the segment with that.
Sounds good.
Okay,
All
thank
right.
you.
Okay.
Real Estate Tips, brought to you by Matt Lee of Royal LePage.